When the owners of Checkers and Rally's decided to merge their separate racing-themed drive-thru burger chains into one, it seemed like a recipe for success, but it wasn't. That is, until it was. Which is why, today, we're looking at the fall and rise of Checkers and Rally's.
But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. And let us know in the comments below what other food through the decades topics you would like to hear about.
1986 saw both the Challenger space shuttle explosion and the Chernobyl disaster, so people were generally pretty bummed. Luckily, a guy named Jim Patterson founded a fun little restaurant named Rally's in Louisville, Kentucky. Despite his unassuming name, Jim had a Midas touch with franchised fast food restaurants. 10 years before Rally's, he founded Long John Silver's, also in Kentucky, because who doesn't drive through Kentucky and think, I could go for some clam strips? He also helped start the Mexican restaurant chain Chi-Chi's, as well as Gulfstream, which is not a restaurant, but rather a petroleum services company, so maybe don't eat there. Anyway, Rally's wasn't your regular fast food joint. For starters, it had not one, but two drive-thru lanes, making the dine-and-drive crowd their top priority. Feel like sitting down in some nice AC, protected from the southern humidity and summer bugs? Tough noogies, because Rally's was almost exclusively outdoors, with outdoor seating, and many locations that don't offer doors for anyone but staff. Customers would order through a walk-up window, then sit down to enjoy their food while watching cars drive by. But there must have been something crazy on the menu besides exhaust fumes that got people coming in, right? Nope. Rally's wanted to keep things fast, cheap, and simple. Originally, there were just 11 items on the menu, all of which could be ready roughly 45 seconds after ordering. Not so much farm to table as factory to freeway, but they knew what their brand was and stuck to it. Their original menu included the Rally Burger and the Big Buford Burger, which is sort of their version of McDonald's Big Mac. It also included a chicken sandwich, seasoned fries, onion rings, sodas, and milkshakes. And just as customers were gobbling up Rally burgers, Rally's spent 1991 and 1992 gobbling up other food chains, taking over Maxie's of America, Zips Drive-Thru, and Snap's Drive-Thru. Crackle and Pop were apparently left to fend for themselves. In 1996, however, the tables turned and Rally's was purchased by CKE Restaurants, which also owns Carl's Jr. and Hardee's. With that, Rally's had finally joined the major leagues. Or actually, it's racing themed, so maybe NASCAR? Anyhow, if you thought Rally's was the only fast food restaurant with a racing theme that was primarily drive-thru in the South, you would have been so wrong. Back in 1986, a totally different Jim opened a totally similar restaurant in Mobile, Alabama, called Checkers. This Jim, last name Matei, was a real estate developer and Wendy's franchise owner who believed drive-thrus were more profitable than indoor dining. Sound familiar? If not, start this video over and put the drink down. Allegedly named Checkers after the plethora of checkered cabs in Alabama at the time, the drive-thru restaurant put the pedal to the metal by going public in 1991 and then being bought by, wait for it, CKE Restaurants in 1996. So now CKE had two fast food businesses with similar themes and menus, both focused on drive-thru and takeout. But what good is having two restaurants if they just fight over the same clientele? So some genius, probably named Jim, suggested instead of having the two restaurants compete, why not combine them? And that's how fast food chain babies are made. Before the merger, both restaurants focused on drive-thrus and served similar items: burgers, fries, drinks, but there were differences too. For example, Checkers kept its menu limited, whereas Rally's started expanding with chili, hot dogs, and combo meals. So in essence, Checkers was a minimalist burger stand, and Rally's was the desperate high school kid who didn't have a date to prom, willing to do whatever it takes to be accepted. But after the merger, they'd be identical in every way, except one. Just as Carl's Jr. and Hardee's did, the individual Rally's and Checkers locations would maintain their original names. Checkers also mostly stayed in the Southeast and along the East Coast, while Rally's stretched from the Midwest through the West. So go ahead and call it Rally's, call it Checkers, or even call it Rackers and Jellies. It doesn't matter because they all have the same items made the same way using the same ingredients. In any case, the company now had a combined 854 locations and got busy aligning their operations. Why go through all that effort if they're not even giving them all the same name? Operational performance optimization. Sexy, right? Together, Checkers and Rally's could get cheaper ingredients at scale, standardized kitchens, and open new locations more easily. After the menus were synced, it was time to beef them up, hamburger pun intended. During the early 2000s, for example, there was a value war in fast food. So Checkers and Rally's both added new combo deals to their menus and pushed them as the best bang for your buck. Then in the 2010s, they leaned into their big on flavor shtick by adding burgers loaded with barbecue items and bacon, specifically the Baconzilla and Barbecue Bacon Buford, the burger with a name you should never try saying 5 times fast. Then came the premium fast food trend, which sounds like an oxymoron, but isn't if you consider different cheeses, specialty sandwiches, and seasonal fish sandwiches taking things up a notch. And by 2020, the fast food chicken sandwich wars were raging, so Checkers and Rally's responded with the Mother Cruncher, a large crispy chicken fillet with lettuce, tomato, pickles, mayo, and a toasted bakery bun. But the real MVP of Checklies was still the seasoned fries, battered for extra crunch and aggressively seasoned for that please think of this as more than just a fry taste. The chain was well aware of their popularity too. They even had a Black Friday promotion giving them away. Get it? Friday? Because it's fries. Anyway. When it came to their joint marketing, the combined Checkers and Rally's tended to be pretty direct. Take their first major combined marketing slogan, "You gotta eat." It's not an invite, it's a command. After that, they went with outrageously good food, which sounds like an idea they got from Kermit the Frog.
Have you tried something simple like Ocean Breeze soap will get you clean?
In the late 2010s, they went back to emphasizing the fries with the marketing campaign Fry Love, which sadly has nothing to do with that heart-wrenching episode of Futurama where Fry moves the stars for Leela.
I moved the stars themselves to write her a love note in the sky.
That was followed by the similar but different Crazy Good Food, which was at least 2 syllables shorter than the last Good Food slogan. Another post-merger campaign advertised Checkers and Rally's as high-performance human fuel, which doesn't sound like much until you find out it was attached to an anime-styled commercial illustrated by Peter Chung, the guy responsible for Aeon Flux. The spot featured a woman named Holly in her reckless pursuit of food. Holly would later become the name and voice of Checkers and Rally's AI spokesperson, but despite the fact her commercials went so much harder than needed to, in 2007, Holly was sent packing, and an advertising restructure gave us Little Place, Big Taste. Then Rap Cat came along. As cleverly named as the slogans were subtle, Rap Cat was just that, a stuffed cat that performed rap songs about the restaurant, and the videos became a YouTube sensation. Checkers and Rally's doubled down on this momentum by giving away paper bags patterned like basketball jerseys and encouraging customers to put them on their cats. And boy, did PETA love that idea. Fortunately, their next mascot was feline-free, Mr. Bag.
I got buns! Who wants to see my buns?
Yes, Mr. Bag was a talking paper bag who came along with the slogan, "It's in the bag." Because why not? If that was out of left field, how about rapper Rick Ross partnering with the brand in 2017 and acquiring a location in Carroll City, Florida? Ross said he was inspired to buy back the block and support the underdog, and claimed Checkers and Rally's had the best burgers and fries in fast food. And lest we not forget February 2016, when Burger King announced it would start serving hot dogs, an item that had been a staple on the Checkers and Rally's menu for years. As such, the latter took out a full-page ad in USA Today and started a wiener war. The ad challenged Burger King to compare wieners, claiming Checkers and Rally's offered their delicious dog for half the price of BK's Frank. Subtlety was never Check and Ral's forte, but who cares when the in-your-face campaign doubled sales? Cheeky Ral's won the Wiener Wars, but thanks to the pitfalls of poorly planned expansion, the victory celebration would be brief. Long story short, they tried to scale quickly without owning everything themselves, and when franchisees weren't given time to get up to speed, growth outpaced operational quality. They also opened restaurants in marginal areas, where oversaturation created cannibalization between locations. In a 2004 interview, former CEO Keith Saroy admitted, "We went places we never should have gone and spent too much. This overconfident approach resulted in losses of $1.7 million in 2002, and as consumer dining habits moved away from unhealthy fast food, the chain also suffered against healthier chains and ones with indoor seating. Never ones to toss in the paper bag, Checkers and Rally's scrambled to stay alive. Up until 2003, they hadn't really settled on their character. Greasy spoon, 50s diner, gimmick? The drive-thru format and 99-cent burgers were no longer enough, so Soroy created the Go program, or guest-obsessed training module. A cornerstone of Go was reinforcing basic standards, like service with a smile, which Soroy thought had disappeared as the chain grew. He also needed to pick a lane, racing pun intended, and reframe the chain as a blue-collar burger joint for young to middle-aged men who wanted something quick and cheap on the road. The strategy worked, and profits rebounded in 2003. 3 years later, Wellspring bought the chain for $188 million and took it private. Then in 2007, former Burger King executive Rick Silva became CEO and made it clear he wanted to expand. Yes, that's exactly what led to the chain's problems in the first place. But as the saying goes, once bitten, twice as likely to do it again. The goal this time was to expand to 1,500 locations, with a redesign where covered seating replaced the second lane in the dual drive-thru architecture. This gave franchises more layout options, and with modern signage and menu boards, the upgrade earned its keep. A test location in Cincinnati saw sales rise from $800,000 a year to $1.2 million. There's nothing like success to make you want to sell, and sell Wellspring did in 2014, handing the chain to Sentinel Capital Partners. At the time, there were 782 U.S. locations, 332 company-owned, and 450 franchises. 3 years later, Sentinel sold the company to Oak Hill Capital Partners for a Buford-sized $525 million. Where some might think Sentinel discarded the drive-thrus because something was wrong, turns out it was the opposite. Sentinel grew earnings, increased the company's valuation, and found a buyer willing to pay a premium, a textbook private equity exit. So, a good thing. What happened next, however, no one could have prepared for. When the pandemic showed up, Checkers and Rally's were hit hard, just like every restaurant. But CheckRal had a life preserver, its no-seating design and drive-thru focus. While dining room restaurants struggled, Checkers and Rally's could keep operating. With this modest victory, Silva departed in 2021 and raced over to Culver's to become their CEO. Now, if the name Rick Silva sounds familiar, and you aren't majoring in chain restaurant CEO history, it's likely because Silva became an audience favorite on Undercover Boss in 2012. He seemed to genuinely appreciate the lower-ranking employees, and even stood up to an abusive manager, ruining his cover. So Silva, if we can believe what we see on TV, you're one of the good guys. What wasn't good was the state of the company. In 2022, Checkers and Rally's added 53 new locations, a sign that things were going well. Behind the scenes, however, the company was $300 million in debt thanks to Oak Hill's 2017 acquisition. It seemed like bankruptcy was coming, but they were saved by yet another private equity firm. Arbor Lane Capital Management bought the chain and reduced the debt by over $200 million, allowing the restaurant to skip bankruptcy. Rap Cat really must have 9 lives. That potential 2022 bankruptcy was a close call, but it seemed like Checkers and Rally's had found steadier footing when it hired new CEO Francis Allen, a former CEO of Boston Market. Soon after stepping in, however, Francis announced plans to open 40 to 50 new locations. You're probably thinking there's a twist coming, like this time the expansion was a success. But she stepped down in April 2024, so we're thinking not so much. That brings us to Chris Tevin, the former president of Mars Retail, who took over Cheraz in 2024 and remains CEO today. Chris was appointed to drive the next phase of growth, which amazingly does not seem to mean opening a bunch of new stores. Looking at you, Francis. And so far, Checkers and Rally's appears to have done just that, rallied. There are currently about 870 total locations, with Checkers making up about 60 to 65% and Rally's the remaining 35 to 40%. The company made a good bet with new 570 square foot designs, leaning into a small footprint strategy, while other franchises struggle with large real estate. These smaller stores also fit into more urban areas, another advantage. And instead of pushing expansion everywhere, they are being more methodical, designating high-priority regions like Virginia. Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania as their next targets, after doubling restaurants in the St. Louis area. Today, Check Alley's isn't one of the big three burger chains, but they are currently in the most outrageously good financial position they've seen in a decade. That's quite a rally. Or checkered. Or checkers? Or is it checkers? Whatever. So what do you think? And are you a Checkers cheerleader? Or do you go rah-rah for rallies? Let us know in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to like and subscribe, and then check out some of these other videos from Weird History Food.